Back to the Dean Obeidallah show. Right now, very happy to have back on the show our friend Representative Lateefah Simon, a Democrat representing the 12th District in California, serves on the House Committee on Oversight and House Committee on Small Business. Representative Simon, nice to see you here. I'm on the same coast as you for a change. I think you're on the same coast. I'm not sure where you are, but I'm
Well,
on your coast.
I am in DC. I will be heading back to the district in just in a few days. I've been working really hard with my team. They call this a spring or summer recess. I think that members of Congress should be working. Our democracy is absolutely in peril, and my team, we're working really hard to make sure that, once folks come back, that we're ready to go. But in the interim, uh, the president and as you know, the governor of Texas, they are trying to roll over our democracy. So we got work to do.
Yeah, so let's start with that. I mean, that's such an important issue right now that everyone's talking about. Republicans want to add 5 seats. And Ron DeSantis in Florida is looking at a similar thing. I mean, their goal is to make it a one party rule forever. I mean, that's really what they want to do, just like Viktor Orban in Hungary. Like their goal is no, just you can have local elections we could win, but they really want to dominate us forever. That's the truth.
I think that that's right. What we're seeing is it's unprecedented. When we talk about the rage of fascism, we see it happening in real time. And this is not hyperbole. We are in danger of losing all that we have fought for, not just people of color, not just marginalized communities. We're talking about America writ large, our Constitution, what we hold dear in terms of having a multicultural democracy. The Republican Party is hell bent on shutting out voices and voters of color. They're doing it in plain view. And I think that what we're seeing from the Democrats. I'm very proud of my colleagues, both the state, local, and the national electorate. We're going to fight back.
And what do you want to see? I mean, California, your home state, Governor Newsom is openly, I think, committed now to having a special session of the legislature to try to add more seats. What's your reaction to that? Do you want to see Democrats like Governor Hochul in New York, who seems open the same way, and Governor Pritzker in Illinois?
I mean, one of the things that I'm wrestling with in my mind is how do you fight a group of folks who want to tear apart all that we fought for?
Right.
How do we do that? How do we go toe to toe with folks who could care less about folks like you and I and our voting rights? We use every single toolbox, everything in the toolbox to fight
Hmm.
back. You know, Democrats play by the rules. One of the things that is important for us to realize now, our rule is freedom and justice and the rule of law. And the rule of law, again, should be whatever we do in California, it will be legal.
Hmm.
I know that. Whatever
Right.
we do in other states who will join in, if we should move to fight back toe to toe with these folks, uh, we will use our values to move forward. Listen, everything is on the line. I mean, I cannot tell you since I came into Congress what I have ever thought that our administration would be kidnapping US citizens and folks green card holders on the street. Would I have ever thought that they would be sending folks, young children fighting cancer, back to their country of origin who has no medical care? I mean, I can go on and the banning of books, the bullying of universities, the shutting down of free speech. Listen, that is right now, again, this is just the beginning. So
Yeah.
whatever we choose to do, damn Skippy, we need to do it to hold down the fort, to hold down our values.
Yeah. This is really an existential threat that we have facing us the same way generations before had one during World War II in Europe. Now we have it here on our soil that wants to end our democratic, and I think end our self determination as a people on a national level. On the state level, they'll let us have crumbs. Representative Lateefah Simon, I want to touch on something else that you talked about in your committee recently about Republicans want a segregated America as to race,
Yeah,
disability,
yeah,
and the list goes on. And
that's
then
right.
we'll dig in a little bit more specifically to disability because that's such an important issue. So, what share a little bit of your point of view? What do they want? How they're working toward this segregated America?
I mean, you could use a test case in Texas,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's just clear as day. The Voting Rights Act was a hard fought win for and during the civil rights movement. It was to ensure that people of color, it was to ensure that marginalized communities had a rightful say at the ballot box. The disenfranchisement of marginalized people in this country was as American as apple pie until good folks from around the country stood up and used, again, non-violent, coordinated strategy to fight against an administration, both at the national level and the state level, all around the country, to ensure that folks had their say. So when I say that we're moving towards a segregated America, if you think about the hard fought wins of ensuring that African Americans, Black and Brown folks could have the right to be employed
Hmm.
in federal spaces, the Trump administration alone has fired 20,000 African Americans from federal service. They have taken a direct assault in ensuring that lesbian, bisexual, gay, and transgender folks are maligned in our United States military. The Trump administration fired an African American woman who was stellar, who led our Library of Congress. They fired really every single Latino and African American in leadership at the Kennedy Center, again, wanting to whitewash our artist community on a national level. I am just articulating the tip of the iceberg, decimating the Department of Education.
Hmm.
That, again, was another hard fought win during the civil rights movement to ensure that disabled students, that Black students, right, that immigrant students, that they all would receive a standard of treatment, not curriculum. That's on a state level. That happens at the state
Hmm.
level. They told you that DOE created curriculum, not so. But we know, those of us who know, we know the Department of Education was was created and facilitated and governed by an understanding that every child in this country had the right to learn, had the right to learn with the conditions that they were deserving as children. And so gutting and closing the Department of Education takes apart, again, all oversight of our education system, both on a K through 12 and a collegiate level. The little that folks know, it wasn't just the disassembling of the Department of Education that's harmful to our babies. The Civil Rights Division investigated
Hmm.
and worked with the Department of Justice to ensure that children who were bullied, young people who were literally sexually assaulted on college campuses, they would have the right and the resource to have their cases investigated by the federal government. That will be no more. So we are now in a situation, it's not hyperbole, right? Where we have an administration that says, one, we don't care about you. Uh, Two, we're going to take the books out of our libraries that tell our history. We're going to fire folks from the federal government who their main purpose was to make sure that you were being treated fairly. There are white only communities being developed across the South. You all, we're just 7 months in. So, why I do say states with a conscience, public officials, elected officials with a conscience, let us tell the story not just of what's happening now, but let's not be ahistorical to understand what we have been through and why we are setting back the clock a good 60 years. And we
Yeah,
say, hell no. I believe we will win this fight. It will be tumultuous, but we will win it.
hell no, indeed. And I could not agree with you more. It's not to MAGA, at least to Trump and MAGA. It's about pre-Brown versus Board of Education. It's
That's
taking
exactly right.
America back before Voting Rights Act of 65, before the Civil Rights Act of 64. It is, and even the cut in Texas, the white supremacist angle of it's barely talked about. They're adding two more white majority white districts in a state that's only 39% white. There's going to be 24 out of 38 seats are going to be white. You know how hard that is in a state that's 39%? You have to have a computer that's a white supremacist computer that goes,
You
okay, we're
know,
going to bring all these white people here and there and put them together, as opposed to being, it's 40% Latino state. They should have most districts. And that, so I think what I so applaud what you said, Representative Simon. People have to get where the source of this is, and it's about protecting white supremacy at all costs. That's so much of this.
That is exactly right. I mean, the thing is, what we need to be clear about as Democrats, as folks who live in this country, we have absolutely no room for racism, any kind of discrimination. Our white brothers and sisters are better off when there is equal representation. Our Black and Brown and Asian people, our brothers and sisters and siblings are better off when they have equal representation. You see, because we don't teach history anymore in K through 12, real history, there's oftentimes not a conversation about what was what life was like before the Voting Rights Act,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where certain folks could not vote. You had folks who looked like me, like my mother, like my father, like my grandparents, who in states like Arkansas or Louisiana weren't allowed to vote. There was some protections, but protections were foolery. You would have to go into your registrar and guess how many candies were in a candy bowl. I mean, literally, we're going back to that space. To be able to vote, you you will not be able to, under this administration, if we don't intervene, be a part of this representative democracy. And listen, these folks, I want to be clear, they
Mm-hmm.
will quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They will quote Lincoln. And in the same breath, they are working hand and nail, hand and foot, whatever the say it is,
Right.
to gut the civil rights offices,
Mm-hmm.
to criminalize protests, to ban books, and to erase history. I have not said one thing that is not true.
No, what you said absolutely true. And when you put it all together, it's even more alarming. I'm chatting with Representative Lateefah Simon, representing the 12th district in California. So I wanted to touch on. You mentioned with Department of Education how that impacted the disabled community. I had a disability activist on last week, my friend Steve Way, he's also a comedian and actor, and he was talking as well about the Medicaid cuts and
Yeah.
the effect it's going to have on his family and his mom and others. Can you give people a sense overall of the war on the disability community by Donald Trump?
Yeah, I one of the reasons that, well, it's a very difficult time. I'm very happy that I'm in the United States Congress. I was born legally blind and I was born a preemie. All of my life, I've had to make decisions that able-bodied people don't necessarily have to think about.
Right.
Transportation being one of them, never being able to drive a car, how I learn, how I see the board. I actually introduced an act called the See the Board Act to ensure, with all of these cuts, that every child, K through 12, has access to vision screenings. It's extremely important. But beyond that, when you are threatening to take away 17 million people's healthcare over the next 10 years, I want to give a big picture of what that means. I don't care if you have insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Most of your hospitals, most of our hospitals in this nation, about 30% of their revenue comes from Medicaid or Medicare. And so what that means is if you are very healthy, because we have a presidency that doesn't care about the middle class, much less the poor, your hospitals of choice are going to experience, some may close, many will close, rural hospitals will close because they rely solely, almost solely on these reimbursements. But even in your wealthier communities, even in your communities like the one that we're in right now, you're in right now in the Bay Area, 30% of how they move. So that's 30% of your equipment. That's 30% of your doctors. That's 30% of your pathologists. That's 30% of your lab techs. Uh, these these laws all bundled up in this nasty big nasty ugly bill will deeply impact disabled communities. I want you to think about, in your community, you have a child, a child that is fighting cancer, that is fighting an autoimmune disease, that is fighting a terminal illness. And you know that that child's family is deeply suffering, regardless of how much resource they make, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know that that mother or that father, that grandmother has to completely take off work so that child can be at their appointments, can be inpatient. One of the most striking undercover assaults in this big ugly bill is that healthy, able-bodied people will not have access to Medicaid right? And so not as just a direct assault on disabled folks, but our caregivers who are
Hmm.
full time working with disabled folks and sick folks and elderly folks won't have access to their own health care. If you think about a disabled child who is maybe in Alabama, who right now has rights under the ADA, and those rights are overseen by the Department of Education, the Civil Rights Division. That child deserves to be integrated, fully integrated in an educational experience. Suppose that child is autistic and maybe uses a wheelchair, or maybe blind, or maybe has a hearing impairment. That child has fewer protections than they did just a few months ago. You think about, and lastly, I mean, there's so many examples about a child who is bound to their home. They will lose benefits. We know that. We have read the bill. We have talked to the physicians. You know, um, we have seen just a catastrophic shakeup and anxiety within our medical community. There are children, there are elders, there are adults who are desperately seeking a cure for their diseases. They're fighting every single day just to catch breath. And there's a lab out there, like the one at Lawrence Livermore, who will be laying off staff. Lawrence Livermore Lab in my district,
Hmm.
okay, is on the front lines of combating cancer and diseases that, again, have no cure, diseases where, you know, there's very small amounts of folks who get those diseases, so they're not deeply funded. The research is not funded. Lawrence Livermore Lab has also been hit with cuts. So folks who are struggling with diseases that have created deep impairments and disabilities, their lives are can and will be cut short by this heartless administration. What we're going to have to do is win back the House and rebuild. We are
Hmm.
losing the best and the brightest minds in our research community, within our medical community, and who suffers? That little baby girl with the big glasses who's in kindergarten, who deserves an aide to help her read Braille or large print. I was one of those kids, and there was, again, funding that came from the federal government to the states, again, to the counties, to ensure that young people like myself could be their best and their brightest. So we got a lot to fight for. And again, disability justice is at the center of everything that I will do in the United States Congress, because every family, whether it's you or one family in a degree of separation, you have someone in your family who deserves great care, great assistance, and moreover, protection.
Very much so, and that was so well put. And my friend Steve Way says how his community is one of the only ones that you could be in tomorrow, like
Yes,
because things happen, accidents happen, people deal,
absolutely.
your body degrades over time. There's all different ways of getting there. Last two quick things, Representative, although they're both very important issues. One is the horrors in Gaza that we're
Yeah,
seeing right now.
yeah.
That is unlike. I've been Palestinian all my life. I've followed this since I was a child. I've never seen the images I've seen in Gaza, the widespread suffering, children starving to death. This is a man-made crisis, and that man is Benjamin Netanyahu, who made this crisis. Is there something more the U.S. can be doing and should be doing?
The war and those images, they're on the minds of everyone in the country, in the world. If we care about humanity, we would say as a nation, we would no longer fuel weapons of destruction in a time where you see children dying, where
Mhm.
20,000 children have been killed, upwards of about 60,000 innocent civilians in Gaza. There is absolutely no way to convey, at least in my heart, a reason why we should continue, even though that we say Israel is an ally. This war, this war is killing thousands of children a month. So I am in complete agreement with many of my allies and colleagues uh, that we can no longer support this war. We shouldn't have supported the war once we knew that the human rights abuses were happening. Now we're 2 years in. Yes, we need to free those hostages. Yes, the right-wing governments of Israel must be held accountable. Hamas must be held accountable. but the children are suffering. No more war. The United States is culpable at this point, and we know it. I'm clear that if we truly if we want to be a leader in the global space, we will say, one, yes to healthcare globally, yes to anti-racism, yes to anti-Semitism, and no to wars that kill innocent children. It's just as simple as that. Folks will say it's more complex. I don't think so. I think we need to use our power of diplomacy, and the we're on the world stage right now, and we need to get our allies together, and push Israel to end this carnage of these children, of these innocent victims.
And I can only hope that will happen. Last thing, I'm in the Bay Area this week in San Francisco specifically, and I talk to strangers all the time. It's what I do, especially like Uber drivers, and people I have conversations with and most of them are immigrants. There's a great deal of concern here with ICE, and these people are all here. They're documented. Some are citizens, some have green cards, but because they have accents and are brown, that they're concerned that ICE might sweep them up tomorrow, or their family member, or their children. It's a palpable concern. What can you share from what you've heard from people in the immigrant community in the Bay Area?
The folks that we're talking to, and many are calling our offices, and I would encourage you to keep calling, and we'll let you know what we understand is happening. They're trying to follow the law. There are folks who have been in asylum processes for years, or green card holders, and they're nervous about going to court. They're nervous about uh, doing all the things that they've been told to do. They're working really hard. Folks are getting ready to send their kids to school. Folks have been in the process. We have an immigration system that has never, ever had the infrastructure it's deserving of. So you've had folks dangling for years, and now they're going to their court dates and they're being arrested right after they leave the courtroom, not able to say goodbye to their families, their children, and they're being placed in detention facilities where they have no due process, and then they're being really discarded to places, not even their countries of origin. So what we're telling folks is, one, really know your rights, although your rights are being trampled on every single day. Work with your organizational community, the NGO community in your communities to ensure that you have representation. Um, we are seeing something that is just so grotesque, so scary, so disgusting that, if you're in this country and you're working hard, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing by checking in, you're in the process. We know that the pathway to citizenship has been a ridiculously hard one. And then you go to court and then you're taken away like you're a criminal. These are folks who came, the many folks that are calling us who came seeking asylum, and they're being treated just viciously and horribly. Well, I want to say that um, my office is doing everything that we can, working with our colleagues to ensure that we're fighting back against this horrible backlash against folks who are trying to do the right thing. It's disgusting. It's scary having officials wearing masks, not identifying themselves, taking folks. It makes us all less safe. Understand?
Yes.
It really does. It really does. And it's shameful. It's shameful. There are folks, calling in to attorneys. I've been talking to independent attorneys who do immigration, and they're saying, well, you know, I have a really special person in my life. They help my family or they work for me. And can you just help them out? Well, what we're saying is every single one of these folks who are being detained, they're special. They're special to their children. They're special to their coworkers, their families, their churches, their masjids, their synagogues, their temples. And it's important that we see all of these folks as human, worthy of a process that is steeped in dignity and respect.
Well, Representative Simon, I want to thank you for spending some time